Okay, now we are on live. All right, we can start.
Okay. Hi, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, everyone, and good evening. My name is Fatin and my partner Zhang as a moderators of these events. Welcome to join our webinar today. Today we are very honored to have two guests for a session discussion about our topic, exploring mental health issues of people with disabilities and coping strategies. This session is under Professional Speech Communication, Professor Dr. Aida Binti Mukhtar. We have a very special guest here, which is Professor Dr. Rosita Muhammad Amin and Puan Anita Abu Bakar. Let's start this webinar with Surah Al-Fatihah. In today's society, with the increasing pressure of people's life, mental health has increasingly become a topic worthy of attention. Mental health is a concern for everyone, and today we are going to explore mental health issues of people with disability. So before we start interview, could you please introduce yourself to us and our audience? Start from Professor Dr. Rosita.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Rosita Muhammad Amin. I'm actually a lecturer in the Kuliah of Economics for the Department of Economics, Kuliah of Economics and Management Sciences. I'm also the head of the Disability Services Unit under the Office of Deputy Director, Student Development and Community Engagement. I've been there since 2012. At the moment, I'm also a member of the Universal Design Committee under the National Council of Persons with Disabilities, National Council of Persons with Disabilities under the Ministry of Women, and also a member of the panel of advisory board of the PWD Senator, OKU representative in the Parliament of Malaysia.
And Dr. And Miss Anita.
Assalamualaikum. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Very good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much, Fatin, and also Zhang, and also Dr. Rosita. Assalamualaikum. Eid Mubarak, everyone. Thank you so much for having me today. So I'm Puan Anita Abu Bakar. I'm the president and founder of MIASA, a mental health NGO and advocacy and peer support group in Malaysia. So basically, just a little overview of MIASA. What we do is we promote the importance of taking care of your mental health, and we also address the many misconceptions, the negative perception of society when it comes to mental health, people struggling with mental health disorders or psychosocial disability, and we provide livelihood support and also relief support for people that are struggling. So basically, our vision, our mission, and our goal is to help others and it's also to save lives, inshallah. So just a little bit about me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Madam. All right, the second question is, what do you think about disabled group? Can you give me your opinion? Dr. Rosita?
Okay, maybe first of all, maybe I need to also inform that I'm also a person with disability. Okay, I am a wheelchair user. I use a motorized wheelchair because I became a quadriplegic. Quadriplegic means there are impairments in all the four limbs. Okay, but so I cannot walk. Okay, and my arms are not very strong. Okay, so I was born healthy, but at the age of 1, I had poliomyelitis and a very high fever, and that has caused me to be having this disability. All right. So now at the moment I'm totally on motorized wheelchair. Okay. So if you were to ask me, okay, how do I view, okay, what is my view regarding persons with disability. I myself is one of them. Okay, maybe I can say it from the perspective of person with disability. Yeah, if we want to look at it in terms of how we should, okay, first, how we should be looking at the person with disabilities, perhaps we should go back to the, as Muslims, we should go back to the Quran and Sunnah, yeah, how Islam actually looks at persons with disabilities, okay, based on the practices of the Prophet, yeah. So if we know the Surah Abasa, yeah, I think we are very familiar with that, okay, whereby the Prophet was actually was told by Allah, right, not to disregard, a blind person who actually came to the mosque, while the Prophet was busy entertaining the Quraysh leaders, right? They were non Muslims yet, so the Prophet was busy doing the da'wah. But at the same time, there came a blind person, not knowing that the Prophet was busy, asking questions, wanting to learn about Islam. Yeah. So the Prophet did not, was just actually, I think he was just, putting his face, looking at the Quraysh leaders instead of Abdullah ibn Maktoum. But the surah came and was revealed, right, to tell the Prophet, that, you should actually entertain the person who is blind, who actually wants to learn about the religion, right? Instead of focusing on the leaders of the Quraysh at that time. So that actually gives a lot of lesson for us, yeah, whereby what should actually be the way we look at person with disabilities. Okay, they should actually be accepted as a member of society, should actually be supported, and actually be concerned about the person with disabilities, because basically because of their impairments, the group of person with disabilities, they are what we call vulnerable groups, okay, vulnerable groups. So they are very easily, they can easily get sick, okay, and they can easily get, because they are not strong. Sometimes people can actually take advantage of them, so they actually needs to be protected, yeah. And because of the impairment, right, we should actually, support and become their friend, and so that they can actually also become independent, yeah, to lead life just like any other persons, yeah, despite their disability, yeah. But as of now, in the society, how these people with disabilities are being disregarded, unfortunately sometimes they are not actually being regarded as a person who is capable, right, of doing things, because the moment when the person is seen to have a disability, there is actually a stigma, yeah, a stigma that comes to mind, that, oh, this person has got disability, so he or she may not be able to do this and that, okay. So sometimes I do also get that, even though when I came back with a PhD, actually I went to the one of the offices, government offices, welfare offices, so to I think for some matter, and the response from one of the officers asked me, oh, do you go to school? Right? So did you go to school? So the impression is that, just because I have a disability, this there's this stigma that says that, oh, so you're not educated, okay, you're not capable, right? So the first thing, that question that was asked to me was, did you go to school? And I actually came back with a PhD. So I just wanted to tell them, yes, I did. I just so so this is the kind of thing that we find in the society, right? In the society. So unfortunately, what we see is not what should be, yeah. What we see is not what it should be. So sometimes it is the person with disabilities are regarded as less than what they are, yeah. They're not given the opportunity, yeah. And sometimes because of their limitations, and they cannot go out, yeah, because of the environment, okay, it's not very friendly to them. So they becomes marginalized. Automatically they become discriminated, right? Even if people claim that, oh no, we did not discriminate persons with disabilities, yeah, but automatically when places are not accessible, information are not accessible, automatically they become discriminated, right? Even without you, without people, visibly discriminating them, but automatically they are not welcomed, not welcome in that sense. So they become marginalized, yeah. Become marginalized, they become forgotten sometimes, yeah. So this is how the society is, and perhaps this webinars like this can actually help to address some of these misperceptions and misconceptions, yeah. Because person with disabilities live with a lot of challenges, yeah. So the people have that there are different types of disabilities, yeah, that we know. In Malaysia itself, there are 7 categories of disabilities, vision, okay, hearing impairment, okay, and then physical impairment, speech impairment, learning disabilities, mental disabilities, as well as multiple disabilities. So each and every one of these disability, the groups, okay, have got their own challenges, yeah. And a lot of times the society do not understand their needs, yeah, and sometimes also do not understand how to communicate with them. I do not understand their thinking, especially those with learning disabilities like autism and so on. Okay? So I think I stop at that now.
All right, thank you so much.
So for the next question, may I ask Miss Anita of how do you define the social status of no, yeah, how do you define the social status of persons with disability?
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Fatin, for the question. As an introduction as well, like Dr. Rosita, I'm also a person with lived experience. I am a person with psychosocial disability. So I was diagnosed with a mental health condition 9 years ago. And that is one of the big reasons why I formed MIASA, because as we know, people with disabilities or PWDs, we are, the groups that are left furthest in society in the context of inclusion and also human rights. And I, do not wish to in terms of knowledge, obviously, many PWD advocates, Dr. Rosita here, you guys have a lot of knowledge and experience when it comes to PWDs as a whole. For me specifically, I know a little bit more on mental health because I obviously am a person with mental health conditions. So bringing that into the context of mental health, just really quickly, people with mental health conditions are, stigmatized, discriminated. A lot of injustice are being done to them and also or to us, and also human rights abuses. So when it comes to treatments, when it comes to hospital admissions, for example, taking medication, there's a lot of coercion that happens. So this is the reality on the ground when it comes to people with mental health condition, because rightfully, like what Dr. Rizika was saying, orang tanya soalan pergi sekolah ke tak contohnya, walhal they forget that we are human beings as well, where we do not magnify the abilities of people that have disabilities, kan. So this is the challenge and the problem sebenarnya. So having said that, the challenges of especially people with mental health disorders ni is not immediately evident to the normal person, because fasad wise, kan, Dr. Razika and everyone, we look similar like the normal person, kan, sebenarnya. So the struggles are psychological, the emotional. It's not something that it is visible to the naked eye. Dia bukan sesuatu yang kita boleh nampak dengan mata kasar. It's also not something yang kita boleh gapai dengan minda normal. And the only reason why I can say this is because I've been normal before, right? Before I was, diagnosed with a mental health disorder 9 years ago. So when we talk about the social status of a person with disability, then it's not just about, selalunya kalau kita dengar pasal social economic status ni, we typically think about income, kan? But in actual fact, it's a lot of other things. Like Dr. Rizika was saying, she has a PhD. So educational attainment is also part of the socioeconomic status itself. And there's also what we call as, how can we orang kata contribute to society as an example. Tetapi how it correlates is actually what is important for all of us to understand. And one of the things that I really like to talk about is the social determinants of health ataupun social determinants of mental health in the context of mental health. Kan? So it's not just about when we talk about, in the context of disability ke, in the context of, people, able-bodied people pun, it's not just about healthcare. It's about accessing education. It's about accessing housing, it's about accessing transportation, for example. How about social protection? Like Dr. Rizita was talking about that a lot. So these are the things that we need to focus more on, because that way we can prevent people from falling through the cracks of the system. And the reason why I say this is because in the work that Miyasa does, and we've been doing this work not as long as Prof. Rizita, obviously, about 6-7 years now, is we see how when people with either people with disabilities or people with mental health condition, when we are not able to support ourselves in terms of livelihood, and our caregivers passed away, as an example, and we don't have money to access treatments, what will happen is now we don't have a house, our caregivers have died, we don't have a job, we will fall through the cracks of the system, we will end up homeless, right? And the other thing that will happen is the reoccurrence of episodes will happen, or relapses will happen, and then you will be institutionalized, or you will then be incarcerated in prison, because people don't understand, and there is no orang kata not enough interventions in the community, and the community also rejects you, and that is why you're not able to become independent in that sense. So this is what we've seen a lot happening on the ground. So if you look at a homeless person today, the majority of homeless people on the ground, chronic homelessness especially, of course, there are people that are doing drugs, tapi at the same time, many of them have chronic mental health disorders. If you give them the intervention, if you give them the help, and like Dr. Zita said, the support, these people can actually recover in homes, and they can recover, regain normal functioning, and lead quality and normalize and achieve PhDs, like Dr. Zita. So this is the thing that we really need to focus on, guys. So even when we talk about SDGs, because a lot of people in a lot of contexts and discussions we talk about SDGs a lot. So even when we talk about sustainable development goals, it's not just focusing on SDG 3 for us. It's about all the SDGs must involve us, and it must affect us, it must impact us. So this is what really needs to happen. So it's effective, it must be meaningful, equal participation, opportunities, and rights given to every person, specifically, of course, in this context, persons with disabilities, because this is not what is happening. There's not equal opportunities, not even the rights of these groups, the 7 categories, like what Dr. Zita mentioned, is given rightfully in the community. So because of that, the shortcuts happen, the institutionalization, the coercion, not supported decision making, not informed consent, not informed decision. So ini yang berlaku sebenarnya. So there's a lot of gaps, but obviously on a positive note, there has been a lot of progress, alhamdulillah, because of the pandemic hit ataupun the endemic right now, because it really has highlighted how polarized the society is. It has really highlighted what the gaps are, and hopefully now we can move more aggressively and we can build back better. This is what we're really hoping. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the answering. And the next question for the Dr. Rosita. Can I ask you, what do you know about the living conditions of most disabled people in Malaysia?
Okay, I think when you talk about living conditions, I don't think that you mean their dwelling, right? Right. So I think
Yeah.
it relates more in terms of the perhaps the well-being of the person with disabilities. Yeah. So the
Okay.
how they live, okay, how their well-being are affected, right? So when we talk about the well-being of individuals, right? So basically, there are a few domains, right? A few components of the well-being that we normally look at: the physical well-being, spiritual well-being, the emotional well-being, right? And then intellectual well-being, spiritual well-being. So all these I think are very important, right? In terms of for everybody, including for persons with disabilities. So if we were to try to relate each particular one, for instance, we talk about intellectual well-being, like education, right? For persons with disabilities, what is the state of the situation now, right? So well, over the years, of course, there have been improvements in terms of access to education for persons with disabilities, right? So in Malaysia, for instance, there has been a policy whereby for schools, right? So they no longer can reject children with disabilities from entering schools. Yeah? So there's a zero reject policy, right? And at higher education also, we now have disability inclusion policy, right? In universities, and all universities actually now are required to have a disability services unit. Yeah. So so this is a good development in terms of ensuring or allowing or giving opportunity, yeah, for person with disabilities to access education. So that one is actually education is very very critical, in terms of improving one's well-being, overall well-being, in terms of enhancing their livelihood also, right? And also their social status is connected to the previous question just now, right? But however, we find that there is still a lot more, to be done, right? For instance, schools, a lot of schools are still not accessible. Okay, they do not have the facilities for person with disabilities. They don't even have, sometimes, even though they do have students with disabilities, but they don't have accessible toilets, for instance, yeah. And the classrooms are not sufficient, yeah, because classrooms, and also in schools, yeah, you find that sometimes the classrooms for the children with disabilities, they're supposed to be smaller groups, smaller classroom, but because of lack of classroom, sometimes they have to be on floating class, right? Which is actually not suitable for children with disabilities. And imagine if they go to school and they need to go to the toilet, and the toilet, is not accessible, and the person in child is on a wheelchair. So how is it that they can manage, and how are they able to focus on their studies, right? If the facilities is not there to actually ensure that they can actually study comfortably, and they can actually grow and develop just like other children, yeah, in schools. So that is one, in terms of the intellectual well-being and the education, access to education, for them is a little bit limited, yeah. Even though they do given opportunity, but the facilities do not really support, how for them to be learning easily, right, in the environment that supports them to have a good learning experience, yeah. Similarly, even universities, not all universities are fully accessible, yeah. A lot of areas, even in IIM, well, because the way the buildings are constructed at that time, it was not taken into consideration. Many areas are still not accessible, and we're still, improving over the years, right, to improve the accessibility. And these are some of the issues faced, right, which actually affect their well-being, yeah, their intellectual well-being, right, and also, the social well-being also affected. And sometimes social well-being also relates to accessibility of transportation, right? So they need to go places, they need to actually go to work, right? So once they have education, they actually need to go to work. And sometimes they do not get this the opportunity, right? Not given the opportunity to actually get the jobs, yeah? Even though they may be as qualified as another candidate, but
Yep.
unfortunately sometimes, um, knowingly or unknowingly, the employers, sometimes they prefer to take the non-disabled compared to the disabled person, even though the person is as capable, or even maybe even more capable if given the opportunity, right? So this also affect their well-being, yeah, then the living experiences, yeah. If they cannot get a good job, how are they going to be independent financially, yeah? And they may end up, being dependent on government assistance, and that is not what we want, and that is not what they want as well, right? So everybody wants to be independent, but they need to be given the opportunity, yeah. And related to jobs, for instance, right, there's also issues in terms of accessible transportation, for instance. I relate more in terms of the barriers, right, the physical barriers that is faced by the person with physical disabilities, for instance, yeah. So if they cannot get to the workplace, how is it that we expect them to work, right? Even though they can work, but it's very difficult for them to get to the workplace. So that is represents another barrier for them to actually get the opportunity to work and become independent like everybody else, yeah. And of course, not to mention other social well-being, they cannot go to for shopping, right? They cannot go for recreational activities, yeah. Sports facilities are not really meant for them, yeah. So even though they may want to actually go out and have fun with friends, but they are not able to do that, yeah, because of the limitations, the physical barriers that are still existing, yeah. This is in terms of what do you call it, educational, then in terms of the social well-being, right? And what about spiritual well-being? Yeah, spiritual well-being is very important, yeah, for person with disabilities, because they face a lot of challenges, yeah? And one good way actually to find inner strength is actually to go back to the religion, right? And to be close to our creator, yeah? And how best to do that? Sometimes we want to go to the mosque, right? To perform our ibadah and so on, especially for the men, they have to go for congregational prayers, but sometimes the mosques are not accessible, yeah. And for the deaf, the khutbah is not accessible, right? So they cannot understand, the khutbah is not given in sign language, so they will not be able to understand, sometimes things like that are not being given consideration, because for this understanding or this thinking that, oh, they are a very minority group, right? Actually, we are not a minority group, the person with disabilities. WHO actually estimates that 15% of population of any country, right, actually do have some kind of disability. And if you were to add on the elderly, as people grow older, they actually develop disabilities, and if you were to add the elderly, another 15% will be added. So that's 30% out of the total population. And 30% is not a small number. That's one third of the entire population, right? And this is
Yep.
where we need to actually highlight that, this is not a small group that we need to cater for. We actually need to cater for ourselves. I'm talking about the non-disabled, planners, policymakers, they don't do anything about it. They're actually not preparing it for themselves or even their family members. Yeah. So this is, the kind of things that issues that are still faced by persons with disabilities, which actually affect their well-being and their living environment, and the way they live their life. Yeah. So they are not able to become independent, and even worse, because sometimes disabilities are invisible. All right, sometimes they are visible disabilities, and sometimes they are invisible disabilities. Like I meant, like the psychosocial, for instance, is invisible because you don't see it. Get and also learning disabilities. They look like, physically they are perfect, but of course intellectual, or maybe the way they think is different. The way, they perceive things are different. So and the society sometimes do not understand how they think, right? So and a lot of problems in terms of acceptance in the society also becomes an issue. And sometimes parents with children with autism, for instance, they end up, keeping their children in a home. Why? Because when the children outside, the children go into tantrums, the society, people around them would tend to stare or get angry, or get angry with them, and so on. So this is the kind of thing, that lack of tolerance, sometimes in our society, that actually affects, the living experience of person with disabilities and their well-being. Yeah.
Thank you so much for the answer.
All right, so I'm moving on to the next question. I'm going to talk more about mental illness. May I ask Miss Anita about, in general, are disabled people having more mental illness than normal people, and what is the difference?
Okay, all right. Thank you very much, Fatin, for the question. No, not at all. A mental health condition or a mental illness, if a normal person gets it, if a person with, other disability gets it, it's the same thing. So there is a manual called DSM, which is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, where this is actually the guide that clinical psychiatrists and clinical psychologists use to provide a clinical assessment and diagnosis of a person with a mental health condition. So there's no difference in terms of that. Even if a person, is living in a palace, if he has depression, it's similar to the person that has depression that lives in a small house. The only difference would be in terms of exactly what Dr. Zita was talking about earlier, which is accessibility. In order for you to access the mental health services, the treatments, that would be the challenge and remains to be the challenge until today. So I give you a very good example. If a person that is visually impaired or speech impaired or hearing impaired or hard hearing, for example, if you want to access a mental health service, it's going to be challenging. Why? Because there's not going to be a sign language interpreter, for example, beside the clinical psychiatrist, right? So how are you going to be able to relay, what you're going through? And then what about privacy and confidentiality, right? Because then there's another person in the same room as well. So there's a lot of challenges in terms of that, and of course, in terms of resources, because in Malaysia there's only about 400 psychiatrists, clinical psychiatrists across the nation. So that is very little, considering like what Dr. Rosita mentioned as well, the percentage of people with disabilities, and of course those that are struggling with mental health challenges, be it a mental health, a clinical diagnosis, or just a mental health issue. If you want to see a psychiatrist, that would be difficult to access, and of course, um, when it comes to money, right? Because you can go to a private hospital, but then only people with money, M40 or T20, will be able to access it, but not the B40 groups. And of course, the other challenge is because mental health services are very concentrated geographically here in Klang Valley. So as you move outside of Klang Valley, every single service thins out, especially obviously in the rural areas or even in the urban poor areas, as an example. And then of course, all these services, there is a long wait to it. Obviously with the limitation in resources, there's going to be a long wait in order for you to access that treatment, or seeing or getting a clinical diagnosis, or seeing a mental health professional. So these are all the challenges that comes along with it. So as we have seen, when the pandemic first hit, mental health wasn't considered an essential service, so a lot of people that were struggling weren't able to access the services. And obviously, when you have especially people with disabilities, that in itself is a risk factor. So you are more prone if you have these risk factors, right? So, for example, not just people with disabilities, but if you live in the rural areas, or if you have poor mental health literacy, or if you come from a very violent family settings, or if there's negligence, all these things. So these are all risk factors that make someone more prone into getting a mental health condition. So no, there's no difference, but the difference is always in accessing the services. There's no equity in that sense when it comes to mental health services until today. Yep.
Right. Thank you so much for the answer. Let's move to the next question. Is that I want to ask Dr. Rosita, in your experiences, what mental illness are common among the disabled people?
Well, I think that like what Juanita has mentioned, I think there's no difference in terms of whether the affliction of the mental illness, because person with disabilities are also just like other persons. They are also if they are I don't know, if they are perhaps exposed to certain kind of environment that causes them to have a certain mental illnesses, then they will actually get it just like others. But in Malaysia, there's one category that is actually has been actually recognized, okay, whereby one category is the mental category, is the psychosocial category. That one actually takes into account people with having bipolar, schizophrenia, anxiety, depression. There are a big number of conditions which are actually included under this psychosocial category. Yeah, but at the same time, not to say that the people from the other categories, do not get mental health issues as well. But they do get it, and sometimes if we say that persons without disabilities, right, they are also susceptible to getting mental health issues, especially during pandemic, right? Where students, for instance, they move from physical face-to-face classes They have to do online classes, for instance, right? And workers have to actually also work online. And then sometimes for children, for the students, because they cannot afford computers, they have to actually use their phones, yeah, their smartphones, and sometimes they even have to share among the siblings, yeah. So imagine going through long hours, how many hours of school time, okay, one subject after another, looking at the small screen, right? So that is actually very stressful, yeah, very stressful, and it causes a lot of stress. So if a non-disabled community face a lot of stress, yeah, during the lockdown, especially when they cannot go out, yeah, and they cannot go out, they cannot do physical activities, and they cannot release, their stress and so on. So what more the person with disabilities, eh? So people began to realize, that individuals develop mental health issues, under lockdown situation when they cannot go out. And actually, they don't realize that person with disabilities have been locked down their entire life. Okay, because of the physical barriers that exist in the society, in the country, right? So they don't see it that way. So but when they experience it, and suddenly they feel that, oh, the pandemic is bad, when people are locked down, they develop mental health issues. But again, this is the reason why, sometimes people with disabilities, they develop a lot of stress, they become depressed, right? If they, especially if they are not able to go out, yeah, and interact, because human beings, we are a social being, yeah. We cannot live on our own. No, we need to actually interact with other people to make us healthy, yeah, healthy emotionally, physically as well, right? So if we're not able to do that, so that actually affects our mental health as well, yeah. So and this is where I think we perhaps can play a role, okay, to actually educate people, right? Educate people in terms of this mental health issue is actually a real issue. And whenever when we talk about person with disabilities, because of the challenges that they face in life, okay, the impairments that they have, right? And sometimes the things that they have to do, for instance, a person with visual impairment, even if they have low vision. So sometimes when you read of one page, for us with visual, with our vision is good vision, we can read it very fast. But for them, because their vision is very blurred, if you can read it in like, maybe 1 minute, they take like 5 minutes to read it, right? Okay, similarly for me, when I was able to walk a bit, when I was younger, I was able to walk with crutches. Yeah, if walking a short distance, walking a short distance to someone who is capable of walking may take about, maybe this 1 minute of walking, but for me it would take 10 minutes, right? 10 minutes. So that can is actually very stressful, and that 10 minutes is not an easy 10 minutes, yeah. It's actually walking with a lot of difficulty, a lot of energy, a lot of pain sometimes that we have to go through, yeah. A lot of pain, and pain actually also causes a lot of stress and anxiety here. And this actually, if it is prolonged, then sometimes it can actually develop into depression, yeah, into depression. So this is the reason why sometimes, you find that a person with disabilities, okay, do actually develop, okay, also subject to have mental distress, okay. Studies have shown that in the US, they have done a study. It says that adults with disabilities, okay, they report that they experience frequent mental distress almost 5 times as often as adults without disabilities. Okay,
Yep.
why? Because of the impairments and the disabilities, they actually, face a lot of stress and distress in their daily life. And if it's not checked, if it's not stopped, then it can actually develop into something more difficult to resolve in the long run. Yeah.
Thank you so much for the answer.
So I'm going to ask for the next question for Miss Anita. As we are like in Malaysia, so do you think that today's Malaysian society is highly tolerant of person with disability?
Do you think what again?
Do you think that today's Malaysian society is highly tolerant of people with disability?
Oh, okay. I can speak more when it comes to people with mental health disorders, so I will talk about that because I'm very experienced in that area. There's a lot of stigma and discrimination when it comes to people with mental health disorders, and it comes in many forms actually. A very good example is the moment a normal person knows that you have a mental health condition, they automatically change the way they speak to you. So maybe they kind of speak slower ataupun they speak in a different tone, which I find so demeaning because, we can understand what you're saying, we can think like you as well. I think so. First and foremost, a lot of discrimination, a lot of stigmatization, and a lot of it stems what you know from what the older generation believed or had that perception, and then it becomes your own perception. The public perception becomes your perception. You lack that knowledge, but then you don't seek the knowledge at the same time. So it stems a lot from ignorance as well, and a lot of it is not obviously done deliberately. It's also reinforced a lot by inaccurate portrayals by the media, of course, through what you see in movies, through what you see in dramas, music videos, songs, what is reported in the media, being sensationalized. So all these things are reinforced because of what the media does, and of course because, as an example, just take me as an example, yeah. So before, I had mental health condition, and then once I was afflicted with the condition, it's really different because when you disclose that you have a mental health condition, you are automatically not seen as equals. You are automatically not regarded as an equal. So you are seen lesser of a person, lesser in value. Semua benda pun kurang sebenarnya. The moment that you disclose this, and that is why in the workplace, generally, people with mental health disorders do not disclose that they have a mental health condition, which makes it very challenging because at the end of the day, you want to adhere to your treatments. You want to go as much as possible, kan? You want to go for your sessions, and when you're not able to disclose it, it's very difficult for you to get that MC. The environment isn't supportive of it, and obviously these reasonable, accommodation or adjustments, not everyone needs it, right? Not every person with a mental health condition needs it, but you feel very supported if the employer provides it, because then you don't there's no fear in that sense, right? You don't feel afraid coming to work. You feel that not only does your employer support your physical well-being, but your mental health well-being as well. So if, example, you get a panic attack in the workplace, or you're feeling overwhelmed, or you're feeling very stressed, or you're battling suicidal thoughts and ideation, you have a place to go. You can take time out, for example. But if you do not disclose these in the workplace, then obviously it becomes very difficult, especially when suddenly you have these recurrence of episodes, and it disrupts your work performance or productivity, and then suddenly the employer finds out, and then it further reinforces stigma, and then finally eventually you're forced to leave. So a lot of times when these things happen, um, it really reinforces stigma and becomes very difficult or very challenging for people to maintain or sustain their jobs. And so for me, reasonable accommodation, adjustments, seeking knowledge, having training for HR, or even work colleagues, employers in the workplace are very important, so that we don't further stigmatize and we don't discriminate. Because again, even how chronic your condition is, your mental health condition is, you can recover. And I think that the biggest stigma that I've seen via doing this work is people actually have, majority of people, even healthcare professionals, sadly and unfortunately, have the perception where people with mental health condition can't recover. The definition of recovery, that is the part that we need to really understand what it means. Can If you look at the recovery model, we're talking about, we are beyond our symptoms. We are not our symptoms. And even if you look at the chart or the flow of the recovery model, just an example, so that we can kind of visualize it. I'm a person with a mental health condition. So as I go along my recovery process, as an example, yeah, I then become a peer or a friend to someone. So my condition becomes half of me. And then I find, a work, I become an employee. So my condition becomes, a third of me. And then, maybe I get married, I become a wife, so my condition is a quarter of me. I then become a mom, I have a child, so my condition becomes a third of me. So as you go along your journey to recovery in the recovery model concept, you will then realize that your condition is only a dot of you. So this is how you will be able to visualize and not feel disempowered when you have the condition, right? So we're obviously beyond our condition, and I think one of the other things that we really need to focus on, especially in the context of mental health and any kind of illness or conditions, really, is it must be patient centered. So we want to provide autonomy. We want to provide liberty. This is how people with the condition can actually not only recover but thrive in their journey. There are, let me tell you, a lot of people with disabilities, with mental health condition that are actually so successful, but a lot of times stigma silences them. You want to kind of forget about it. I know I don't want to remember when I was stigmatized. I don't want to remember when I was discriminated a long time ago. So now I'm okay and I just want to move on with my life, as an example, right? So a lot of times when we as advocates, myself or Dr. Rosita and the many others out there, what we try to do is we try to speak on behalf of people that are not able to speak for themselves. So hopefully in that sense, our voice can become louder and we can, affect change, affect improvements, a positive change in Malaysia. And of course, globally. And this is what, we're really hoping for. And just like what Dr. Rosita was saying, again, I repeat this, where she was asked whether she even went to school, and then she got a PhD. Last month, I won a global award, a patient champion in science and medicine, and for me, this is such a huge win for patient and peer advocacy across the globe. And never think that your voice doesn't matter, because even that small contribution that you think is small can actually be huge and impact, create a huge impact, a positive impact, even, globally. So just imagine, and for me, it's really inspiring when, people with disabilities are acknowledged, are given that honor. And I think that if more people continue to speak out, eventually a lot of improvements and inclusion, especially, can happen in the community. And this is really what we want to strive for: full inclusion, meaningful participation, equal participation, full rights, given, so that no one is left behind and no one needs to die, really. Because again, when we talk about mental health, a lot of it revolves around suicide. And of course, suicide is still very, very taboo. But the pandemic, again, has helped to really normalize this discussion. And suicide, let me tell you, guys, it is 100% preventable. And, we can play our roles well. And if we do that, we can help to save a life. So, never think that your contribution is small, because, again, you can really not only help someone, but that person can choose to live because of your support, because of your empathy, because of your compassion, because of that kindness and that space that you hold for them. And this is one of the things that I hear a lot from my friends from the other disability groups, especially those that are born normal. So for example, they're born normal, and then the doctors visit and say, one day your child is going to be visually impaired, and so eventually, when they go to high school and then they eventually, become visually impaired, this is when, there's more anxiety. This is when they fall into depression. So that is why that support and that preparation, especially that mental preparation, is very important from the beginning. Sebab kalau tiba-tiba, you want to give that intervention, it's going to be more challenging. But if you can prepare the person, earlier, then it would be a softer landing in that sense. And so, in Malaysia, I think in terms of mental health promotion, in terms of early intervention, we're still, quite weak. But hopefully, we're able to move more aggressively today. And I see even with people with disabilities, I think there's more equity today, as compared to maybe 5-10 years ago. So Alhamdulillah for the progress.
Thank you for the answering, And I'm going to move on to the next question for Dr. Rosita. We, as a normal person, what is the most important things to consider in communication with a disability? Like, what is the best thing to communicate with them? Of how to, yeah, how,
Okay.
like, what is the best thing to communicate with them?
Okay, thank you for that question. The first of all, I think number one, we also need to use the more acceptable terminologies. Okay, so normally we don't use the term disabled and normal person. Okay, so because disabled person is also a normal person. Yeah, so we use the term disabled and a non-disabled person. So I would prefer to use compared to a non-disabled person, right? How do non-disabled person communicate with a person with disabilities? Yeah. I think this is a good question because if as I mentioned before, there's seven categories of disabilities, right? So in actual fact, the way we communicate depends on their disability. Different types of disabilities, have got different ways to communicate with them. A person who is totally blind, for instance, right? Totally blind. So how do you communicate with that person? So of course you can talk to them, but a lot of times they also communicate by touching. Okay, you touch them, right? So that they know. Okay, you tell them, okay, I'm here. Okay, if you want to leave, also you let them know that you're leaving. Okay, you don't just suddenly leave, and then they think that you're still there and they're still talking, and they think that you're still there, and you leave them talking to themselves. Yeah, so that is not right, lah. For instance, right? So if you want to learn how to communicate, we actually need to have knowledge and the skill to be able to do that. So and for the deaf, for instance, I'm sure you know how we communicate with the deaf, right? The deaf who cannot hear, they actually use sign language. Yeah, sign language. So this is where learning sign language can be an added value. Actually, the way we can actually we can communicate with them better if we can learn sign language, so they can also interact with others better. Yeah, and of course they have interpreters. Yeah, but interpreters are not always available. Yeah, and so sign language is one. If we do not know sign language, what are the alternative that we can do? We can actually write down on a piece of paper, for instance, right? So that's a different way, another way of communicating. Yeah, so there are actually many ways that we can communicate. We just need to be creative. Yeah, for persons on with physical disabilities, they communicate the same way as the non-disabled persons. It's just that sometimes when a person talk to a person on a wheelchair, for instance, because they are seated, right? So and the person is standing. Sometimes it's actually a pain in the neck when you have to actually
Yes.
look out, to the person who's standing up. So normally it's advisable if you can also pull a chair next to the person and sit down so that you're at the same level. You can see, more easily, just like you talk to a child, right? The child's small, so you just kneel down to the child and talk to them, right? Instead of them having to look up. Yeah, and usually sometimes even though the person with disability may come with maybe a caregiver, right? But talk to the person, who is disabled. Don't talk to the caregiver as if the person with disability cannot talk. Okay, because there's a different. It's different if the person is ill or is maybe has have not yeah, is bedridden and is not able to talk, and then you can actually communicate to the caregiver, right? But sometimes what happens is that you have a person who's a disabled person working with a caregiver. The person with disability can actually communicate, but people tend to talk to the caregiver instead of talking to the directly to the person themselves, right? So it's like it's like looking down at them as if they cannot communicate. So that you have to communicate with somebody else through them, that you communicate with the person with disability. It doesn't work that way, right? So if you need to communicate with them, you address them directly. Even when we talk to the person who is deaf, right? Even if the person has got a sign language interpreter, so the ethics is that we look at the deaf person. Okay, we look at the deaf person. Don't look at the sign language interpreter. We look at the deaf person because we're talking to them. So and then they are looking at us, right? So if we look at the interpreter, then we are not actually looking at the person we are talking to. So the ethics is we need to look at the person Okay, and even though he cannot hear us, but the interpreter would actually sign to them. Yeah. So then when they talk to us, they actually they sign, but they will actually be looking at us. Okay. So that's how we communicate. These are for people who can communicate, who do not have any learning impairments. Yeah. But sometimes there are also cases where we have people with autism, for instance, right? People with autism. So sometimes autism is a spectrum. Yeah, the spectrum. So we have from the very severe to the high function mild autism also, right? So we cannot actually generalize. But the moment it's autism, we imagine a tantrum, a person has tantrums, who is uncontrollable, who cannot talk. Those are the more severe spectrum of autism, right? But there are also many high functioning autism, okay, autistic people who are even studying in universities. In IIM itself, we have 6 people and 6 students with autism. Yeah, they're high functioning. Some have got mild autism. We also have one who is actually moderate autism. Yeah, moderate autism means their autistic characteristic is very clear, right? It's very distinct. So and there's no eye contact. Yeah. So for people with autism, no eye contact is common. So don't we shouldn't feel we shouldn't feel slighted, or we shouldn't feel like, oh, this person is sombong, or they don't want to look at me. But the people with autism is like that. Depending on the spectrum, sometimes some of them cannot, they don't have eye contact. When they talk, they will look somewhere else, but it doesn't mean that they're not listening to us. They are listening to us. Yeah, they're actually focusing on us. Sometimes when they talk to us, they will actually move about. They don't sit still, but that's just how they are. Okay, they just have to move while they talk, so we just let them be. So because they're comfortable that way, we actually accept them the way they are. So this the important thing about communicating with them is actually understanding how to communicate with them, knowing how to communicate with them, and also accepting them the way they are. Yeah, like people with autism, for instance. Yeah. And sometimes they have sensory issues, so we need to actually understand these things. Sensory, sometimes they are very affected by colors or even lights. Bright lights affect them. So these are things that we need to learn in order to understand them better. So it's very important when we want to communicate with them, we have an open mind. Okay, open mind, and we must actually have that sincerity to actually accept them the way they are. Sometimes the easiest way, the most important one, the most important communication is actually through our facial expression. Yeah, facial expression. Smile. A smile, it speaks a thousand words. Okay, once you smile, okay, it actually tells the person that, oh, okay, you're actually opening the door, okay, to actually this two-way communication. So the person has got a positive vibe already. Oh, this person wants to become my friend, wants to talk to me, right? But sometimes, there are people who do not even want to smile. Okay, so when person with disabilities see this, so they become very what do you call it, introvert. Okay, they do not want to reach out to people. So this is why a lot of people with disability, they tend to suffer in silence. Like Juanita said, they tend to not to talk, okay, about it. They suffer in silence. Why? Because when they try to talk to people think that they are making things up, and especially people with invisible disabilities. Okay, they think that they are making things up. So they pass judgments. When people behave certain way, oh, this person is, so something wrong with person. Okay, this person is crazy or something. This is I'm sure, I'm sorry, that's the it's a harsh word, but sometimes that's what they say.
Betul.
That's what they say. So this is not nice things to say about them. Sometimes people may behave differently, okay, but it's not because of because they want to, but they cannot help it. Okay, they cannot help it, and sometimes they also do not understand what's going on with them. Like people with autism, they do not understand a lot of things. Okay, a lot of things puzzles them. What we think is logical to us is not logical to them. What is common sense. It's not common sense to them, right? So acceptance and understanding and learning, what they need is also very important in order for us to communicate. So this is why I think for IIM students, for instance, right, we have clubs, and we have many clubs and societies that we actually should have training sessions. We can actually organize sessions where we can actually train you how to interact with the different types of disability. Even when you want to guide the blind, you cannot just simply guide them. There are
Yeah.
a lot of mistakes that people do. When they have the blind, they sometimes they pull the white cane. This is not just a Piramli, not Piramli movie. So they do, you should never pull the white cane. Why? Because the white cane is actually their eyes. Okay, so if you pull their white cane, because they become very disoriented. Okay, so what you need to do is actually to tap them. Okay, we need help. Okay, and then there's a way that you need to guide them. You don't pull their hand, they actually hold your hand and you guide them. Okay, so but this one you need to actually illustrate. I cannot just explain it verbally. We need to actually illustrate. So a lot of things that we actually need to learn in order for us to understand better the person with the different types of disabilities. And the DSU, my office, can actually assist. If clubs and societies want to organize training programs like this, we are more than happy to assist, yeah, and provide the training, yeah, inshallah. So these are the things that we need to know. But the most important thing, as I mentioned just now, is that culture of acceptance. Smile, be their friend. Okay, what they need is to be their friend. Yeah, and this is something that is different. Because I had the experience of doing my master's and PhD in the US, right? So the society is different, from here. Here, when I go out, people tend to stare at you, as if I'm alien. Of course, I work differently. Okay, I may use a mean machine, okay, but you don't have to stare at me, right? So staring is quite rude, actually. But of course, I developed a certain way to respond to that, lah. Right? But but this is actually not a good way to do to actually to react to person with disabilities. Okay, when I go overseas, they treat you like anybody else.
Yes.
So that's the nice part about it. They smile at you, they greet you like anybody else. So they don't treat you like a second class citizen. Okay,
Betul.
they don't treat you as a second class citizen. They treat you as
Yep.
equals, right? As capable as they are, and with the same self worth, right? So that is why over there, people with disabilities, they do not have much of issues of low self esteem, right?
Yep.
They are not introvert. Okay, they are just as confident as a non disabled people. But why is it that people, with disabilities in Malaysia, they tend to keep to themselves. They become, they have low self esteem, they lack self confidence, and these things, when they go to even for university students, when they graduate and they carry over this characteristic with them in their job interviews, of course, they will not perform well, because in job interviews they require self confidence, they require communication skills, right? You need to be able to work with others, you need to have that sense of self worth in order for you to perform, right? So we need to actually provide that environment, okay, the environment that is accepting environment that can accommodate, okay, person with disabilities, and a culture of acceptance, yeah, so that people become they feel that they belong, okay, to the society. The inclusiveness is there, a true inclusive society, right, whereby everybody is little with with self that according to their self-worth, yeah. So they are treated with respect, yeah, and they're accepted as a member of the society. They also have a right to be a member of the society. Whatever that the other parts of the society receive, they also have a right to get it, right? So these are the things that we see in our society. We compare to the developed nations. If Malaysia wants to become a developed nation, we have a developed mindset as well. We cannot have a third world mindset, and claim that we are a developed nation. And this also goes not just to the society, to the planners, to the policymakers, to the ministers, right? We cannot have, a mindset that say, oh, they're just minority. Oh, no, we don't have enough budget, and this is, no, they're just
Same
minority.
thing.
This is for the majority.
Mm.
No, I am a taxpayer myself. Okay, so but how come I do not get access to the same facilities that other people get, right?
Yep.
So all these things we need to communicate as well. Okay, when we talk about communication, not just with person with disabilities, we also need the non-disabled community help, right? You and you, okay, all our students, the non-disabled community, to actually communicate also to the higher authorities, please, okay, be also an advocate for us as well. Because when non-disabled people advocate for the disabled person, the impact is different. The impact is different. Okay, compared to we advocate for ourselves, they say that, oh, these people are just whining, complaining, that they don't have this and that. But if non-disabled persons advocate on our behalf, that means something. That means, there is something wrong in the society that needs to be corrected, right? So, and we need your help. And maybe you can spread the word to your friends as well. Yeah, to help us to do this advocacy work. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the answer. So
Mm.
let's move to the last question, which is I want to ask both Dr. Rosita and Juan Anita. Sorry. What is the best thing that you would suggest or motivate people who are having a hard time facing their mental health illness? Juan Anita, could you please answer first?
Okay. So I think the main or the key thing to do is when you're really struggling with a mental health condition is you need to talk to someone. Okay, don't keep it in, because that's gonna make it worse. So you want to be able to talk and unload it to someone that you can trust. Okay. So when you are expressing what you're going through, when you're trying to articulate, the emotions or your struggles, please choose the person wisely, because if not, it can really worsen what you're going through, especially if the person is not validating, if they're not holding space, if they're not providing empathy and compassion, or if they're you know giving you or judging you, as an example. So it will really worsen um, what you're going through, and your greatest fear will become true, obviously, right? Because it's really not easy when a person is going through a mental health condition to articulate what they're going through, or to express the challenges, because like I said, we've been normal before, so we know that it's not easy for the non-disabled person or the normal person to really understand. You're not able to relate, you're not able to understand it fully, but really, what we're seeking for is not an advice. It's actually just for you to listen. Even if you don't say anything, right? Even if you're just nodding and, expressing that you understand the narrative that we're trying to convey. Or maybe you can prompt it with short questions so that we know that you're following our story. That would actually be very helpful. So the first thing is talk to someone. Even World Federation of Mental Health and WHO came out with a theme. I think it was in 2019, Depression Let's Talk, just to encourage people to start talking about it. Because the worst thing that you can do if you have a mental health condition is to isolate yourself, because it will really worsen, the situation. This is when people will feel very alone. You're going to feel a chronic emptiness, and then this is when it will you will feel excruciating the psychological pain and these intrusive, suicidal thoughts, ideation. This is when, unfortunately, nauzubillah, people end their lives, not because they want to die, but because they want to end the pain, and because nobody is helping and reaching out to them. Okay, so again, suicide is 100% preventable. So reach out, please help. Provide a listening ear, provide empathy and compassion. The other thing is seek knowledge. Okay, because like what Dr. Rizita mentioned as well is, you when you look at your loved one, you may not understand why they're behaving a certain way or thinking a certain way or having that certain thoughts. But if you seek knowledge, then you understand better, and when you understand better, you know how to respond better, right? So this is very important, because knowledge obviously is transformative, and we need people to understand, to learn more, so that you are able to support better, you're able to respond better, and then from there, people that are struggling can recover better and more effective, as well. And the other thing is, of course, we need a holistic approach to the recovery process, right? It can't just be one thing. A lot of times when we talk about mental health condition, it would usually link to medication, right? Kalau ada mental health or mental illness, or take the medication. It's not just about the medication, and not everyone needs medication. I was talking to a doctor this morning, and he was telling me, he said that 20 years ago, even with diabetes, it was so different on how doctors treat diabetes today. Dulu-dulu kita tak cakap pasal work-life balance. We don't even talk about exercising. Such simple but fundamental things that can really improve your mental and physical well-being, right? But today the approach is so different. So everything progresses. So because of that, even with mental health is the same. It must be a holistic approach to recovery. So we're talking about sleeping well and sleeping on time, getting that enough sleep. We're talking about exercising. You need to invest in all these components. Eating well and eating on time, right? Having that balanced diet, nutritious food. Self-care is so important. Doing things that you like, investing in hobbies, guys, especially students. A lot of times students come to me, oh, Juanita, I don't really know what I like to do. It's okay. Self exploration, do that now. Try to explore things, and then from there you will eventually find out what your passion is, what your interest is, and invest in these things. Really, truly, take it from me, invest in your hobbies, invest in time for yourself, self-care. And of course, one of the other key things is social connectedness. Spend quality time with family and friends, okay? And of course, the spiritual component. I can tell you, in my recovery journey, spirituality was a huge component to my recovery. And a lot of times what I've seen is, despite whatever religion a person is, when you have that, it really helps to hold you together, even how excruciating that pain is. And even when we're talking about, again, people that go through suicidal thoughts, ideation, or even planning, a lot of times what really holds them is actually being grounded in the faith and iman, in Allah and God. Really helps to hinder that unimaginable act of suicide. And those of you that don't really understand suicide, let me just explain it. It can be like an itch. When you have an itch, you feel like you want to scratch it. That's how suicidal thoughts and ideation is. You feel, and the symptoms will want to push you to do that. Nauzubillah. And it's a symptom of a condition, specifically depression. And if you treat depression, right, the suicidal thoughts and ideation will go away. So please understand that. And it's intrusive. So as an example, if you're sick, right, you have, a cold comes in, you have, your body temperature increases, you have a cold, a sore throat. You can't stop these symptoms from coming. Similarly, if you have depression, you cannot stop the suicidal thoughts and ideation from coming, but you can manage it, and you need to address the crux of the issue, or the underlying issue. You need to solve that. Then all these things will go away, and you can recover and regain normal functioning. So what does this mean? So for example, in the context of this pandemic, a lot of people lost their jobs. We read in the media, even recently, there's this person ended their lives because of financial difficulties and challenges. And obviously, getting a mental health condition must be multifactorial. But if you have these situations, and people come to me and say, Juanita, but I went through that treatment, I took my medication, it is a holistic approach to my recovery, I exercise, I'm eating well, but the crux of the issue isn't solved, because you still don't have a job today. So these are some examples of what needs to happen. Okay, so when a person has, the cause of it is financial struggles, then they must be given some help in terms of financially, right? Then only that recovery process can happen, other than getting that treatment, going to that therapy, or taking medication, or praying, etc., etc. So it must always be a holistic approach to recovery. So these are some of the things that we can do in order to help us, and of course, learn good, effective coping mechanisms, right? Even something as simple but as effective as deep breathing exercise, relaxation techniques, grounding techniques. These are all, for me, quick wins, and we can all learn this, and everyone should learn this, really. Because everyone is stressed today, right? We sometimes feel overwhelmed. There's a lot of fear, a lot of panic, a lot of uncertainties, and it can overwhelm understanding even. So because of that, it is really important, especially now being students, that you have, and I always say this, students feel very privileged, because you have access to all these information, and use this information wisely. Share it, spread it across, learn it, share it with others, because really it will help you, it will help your friends, your family members, etc., etc. It's a domino effect always. So I think that is all. So thank you so much. Hope that helps.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Doctor. How about Dr. Rosita? Can you give us your suggestions about this question?
I think what Anita has covered most of it. Maybe I just would like to add a little bit more.
Yeah.
For persons with disabilities, and we do have students with disabilities in the past. Sometimes they go through a lot of hardship, but they do not want to share, the difficulties that they are facing, to the extent that they develop, depression, to the extent that there has been cases where, there are suicidal thoughts as well, right? So they tend to suffer in silence. One of the reasons is, of course, because of the non lack of receptiveness on the part of the peers, right? Okay, as I mentioned when we talk about communication just now, right? When the person asks for help, sometimes, because even though, the student, the example that I give is the student with visual impairment, right? But the eyes look normal, okay, like somebody everybody else. So, the friends do not believe that he has visual impairment, right? So whenever he asks for help, so people think things that he's making things up, right? Trying to, maybe take advantage of the friends and so on. So that kind of response, okay, and reactions actually causes them to keep to themselves, right? To keep to themselves, and as a result, they develop a lot of depression, right? So when, but fortunately for that case, he reached out to us. Finally, he reached out to us, right? And we found out about it, and after that, we supported the student, and Alhamdulillah, he graduated already. Alhamdulillah, successfully graduated, and he recovered from his depression. Alhamdulillah, yeah. But this is the thing, yeah, that what I'm trying to say here is that, not just for the person having disabilities, yeah, not necessarily mental, psychosocial disabilities, but they may develop this stress and anxiety and depression, right? Because they do not want to share the problems and the challenges that they face. Okay, they try to solve it by themselves, but they are not able to do it, right, without support from the institution, from the university, for instance, right? So they have to come out and reach out, come to us, right? The DSU, the Disability Services Unit, is here to assist. Yeah, do not wait until you get into deep trouble. Okay, because we are here to support. Okay, we do not judge. We're here to support, right? And the university has got a disability inclusion policy already, which was launched in 2018, and we actually have this mechanism in place already. So do not be shy and do not feel bad. A lot of times, person with disabilities, they feel bad, to reach out, because they say that, oh, I don't want to susahkan orang. I do not want to trouble other people. I do not want to trouble other people. And this is, and partly the reason is, of course, other people, right? Because of the way they react. Okay, they're not very receptive to the person with disabilities when they try to reach out. So sometimes this is also causing, the person to become introvert and not share these issues. So for our students who have disabilities, right? Even if you don't have disabilities, but you face issues, please reach out, okay? And talk to others, talk to your friends, talk to the right people, as Juanita said, right? But most important of all, talk to Allah, right? Talk to Allah. We as Muslims, we have a recourse, right? We have a recourse. We know that, the Quran actually, when we recite the Quran, it gives us peace of mind, right? And in fact, even in the Quran, in Surah in Surah 13, verse 28, Allah says that, verily in the remembrance of Allah, do hearts find peace, right? So how do we remember Allah? We read the Quran, we do zikrullah, right? So whenever we feel that we are down, or you're faced with a lot of stress, right? Apart from doing all the good things that what Anita says, okay, one additional thing, because it's a holistic approach, which is good, the holistic approach that we're trying to say, the spiritual side, right? Okay, talk to Allah, right? When we pray during our prayers, we talk to Allah. When we read the Quran, Allah talks to us, right? So that's the two-way communication that we need to have. That's why it's also important for us to develop that inner strength, right? For us as a coping mechanism. So that is very, very important. But at the same time, it's not just the person facing mental health issues have to cope, have to do things to manage their stress. But I also hope that the students, right, the peers, right, and the community around the person, right, is also more supportive, right, more supportive, because sometimes they may actually go into relapse, because we do have also students who have who have faced psychosocial issues. Sometimes they scream, but sometimes when they do that, they cannot help it actually, because but people surrounding them, they don't like it, when she screams, right? But she cannot help it. So this judging, again, please try not to be judgmental towards them, because it's already hard enough for them to cope, right? They actually need our support, all right, to actually understand and give them the strength and the courage to recover, inshallah. Okay, so basically, that is what I can say, in terms of how we can add on to what Anita has mentioned. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much for the answering. And then I will do the conclusion. Um, mental health is mental health is an integral part of health, and everyone needs to pay attention about this mental health issues. And the disabled group people deserve more attention to the mental health issue. And also, um, as the weaker part of the social group, they need the attention of society and us. And thank you so much for your answers, which give us a preliminary understanding of the mental health of the disabled. I believe that in the near future, we will able to truly and effectively care for disabled group. Thank you for coming and answering. Thank you so much.
Thank you also.
Thank
Okay, thank you.
you,
Okay,
guys.
Mubarak. Okay, Assalamualaikum.
Thank
Yes.
you, Dr. Rizita.
Thank you, Juanita. Hope I can see you again.
Yes, inshallah.
Sure.
Amin.
Okay. Okay, Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Waalaikumsalam.
Thank you. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.